Li Bai, Goodbye to a Friend. Blue mountains spread beyond the north wall. White water curves east of the city. This is where we must take our leave. Tumbleweed drifting 10,000 miles. You'll be companion to the floating clouds. Feel the sunset warmth of old friends. We wave. You begin to move away. Xiao, xiao, complain the horses as you go. So here we have yet another poem by Li Bai on the topic of parting. So this is a very similar poem to the one we read yesterday, Farewell to a Friend at Jingmen Ferry. As opposed to that poem, this is a little bit more unspecific. We don't get a clear notion of where we are in this poem. I mean, there are some geographical locators, but they're very vague. So we're in a city close to the north wall of it. There is a river to the east of the city, and there are mountains to the north. But besides that, we get no information, so we could be anywhere, really. And the friend who is parting is given less details than in the previous poem also. At least in the previous poem, we knew that the friend was a neighbor from the region of Shu. So a countryman, if you will, of Li Bai. In this case, we know nothing at all about him. So as we said, the poem is a poem about parting, which is a pretty standard, a pretty conventional topic of traditional Chinese poetry. A sad topic, so scholar officials usually had to separate from each other, and because they had official duties to develop, and among those official duties, very common ones were being sent to posts in the administration of the provinces. China being almost as big then as it was now, as it is now, and bearing in mind that transportation was much more inefficient then. Going from one region of the empire to another could take, depending on the distance, weeks, months, probably even more. So, anyway, whatever the concrete specifics of the situation, we have here Li Bai lamenting the separation with a friend and probably composing this poem impromptu at the parting moment or at the parting feast. Let's, as usual, take a look at the poem couplet by couplet and try to discern what are its main images, its main ideas. As usual, this is a Lu Xi regulated poem, slightly unusually, although it is permissible. The first couplet of this poem is parallelistic. Generally, remember what we say about Lu Xi poems. It's mandatory, among other things, that the two central couplets should be strictly parallelistic in word type and generally antithetical in word meaning. But this parallelism, if wished, can be employed for the whole poem, and in this case, it's used in the first couplet. So the first couplet locates us. It's not too specific, as I've just mentioned, but at least it locates us in an urban scenario with a natural background. Blue mountains spread beyond the north wall. White water curves east of the city. So we get the urban landscape where we are situated at this moment of parting, but we get the background. And mountains and water. Again, the parallelism is very clear in these two lines. Blue with white, mountains with water, spread with curve, north with east, wall with city. So you can see very well the contrasts here. So we're at the starting point. City life is going to be abandoned by at least one of these people who is going to wander and to travel and to pass through the countryside. Now the second couplet puts the focus on the situation, not on the background in which it is happening, but on the situation itself, the parting of friends. This is where we must take our leave. Tumbleweed drifting 10,000 miles. Now this imagine of tumbleweed is very, very common. It's a cliche, you could say, of poems of separation. The traveler, the wanderer, is equated to tumbleweed, floating around without a fixed base. And remember, being far from home and being rootless is a horrible fate from the point of view of traditional Chinese thought and philosophy, especially in Confucianism. Social relations and social connections were prized above everything. A Confucian was a person who made an effort to improve the world by starting by improving himself and his family, then his neighbors, then the whole wide world. A virtuous Confucian was supposed to be tied to a place and to a group of people related by blood and affinity. So the idea of being far away is, anathema. Here we have a conflict of loyalties, serving the empire versus being with one's friends and relatives. And, serving the empire trumps any other. Well, not always, but at least here it trumps all the other loyalties. But still, it's an unpleasant lot for a man to be rootless and having to move around far from friends and family. So 10,000 miles, perhaps it's hyperbolic, that would be, to the other end of the empire. Third couplet. The third couplet furthers these images of the traveler, of the sad traveler, but it reinforces them through some meteorological images, basically of clouds and sun. So two metaphors that equate the traveler and his experiences with the heavens and the things therein. You'll be companion to the floating clouds. Feel the sunset warmth of old friends. So again, clouds like tumbleweed are a pretty conventional image of independent people, rootless people. The cloud imagery generally has a more positive connotation. It's used a lot for Taoist hermits, for unconventional people who become drifting, lonely clouds. It's used also by Buddhist Zen monks as well, the drifting cloud. So he will become like a cloud, traveling on his own, and that might positively reference and directly the uniqueness of the traveler, and he will feel the sunset warmth of old friends. So even while far away, while far from friends, he might still find some consolation in the appreciation, in the love of old friends that will keep him in their memories. And this appreciation is likened to the setting sun's warmth. It's not too much. The setting sun emits little warmth, but it's enough at least to heat you a little bit. And so it will have to be, for the traveling friend, it will have to be enough to kindle his hopes and to make him feel that he is not completely alone in the world, even if at the moment of traveling he might be far away from the people who love and appreciate and respect him. Finally, the concluding couplet. The concluding couplet depicts the separation being consummated and the sadness that attends on it. We wave. You begin to move away. Xiao, xiao, complain the horses as you go. So the friend gets out of sight. He waves away. He's getting out of sight of Li Bai. And as if an echo or as if creating an adequate background to the sadness, the horses seem to cry. Their onomatopoeic xiao xiao is read by Li Bai as a complaint, as a sigh, as a crying at the sadness of the moment and at the departure of a friend. So, not much to say about this poem. As I said, it's a bit like yesterday's, a pretty conventional poem on parting. Again, if I hadn't been told beforehand that this was a a Li Bai poem, I would probably find it impossible to recognize the author. It has none of the trademark individualistic and stylistic traits of Li Bai, which does not necessarily have to be a bad thing. I mean, in our Western tradition, especially in the Romantic tradition, we tend to overemphasize individualism and to value poetry that we feel represents a unique individual, which doesn't have to be a virtuous model. Rather, he has to be a genius, an unusual person. So probably one of the reasons why Lord Byron is appreciated among the Romantic poets, even though he is the counterexample in many aspects from a moral person. Now, the Chinese tradition also puts a lot of focus on poems reflecting personalities, But the focus is more than on individualism, on the virtuous character of a person. And virtue is universal, it's the same in different people, or it should be the same in different people. So the fact that this poem is not too individualistic, that it's quite generic, isn't necessarily a negative point, except from our own limited perspectives. But it's not bad, not bad.